That was then, and then this last year I started on a new experiment. And like most of you, at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016, I had concluded that Google Plus was dead, right? They had pretty much were starting to disassociate the close ties to local. I couldn't ever make it work on behalf of my clients. I was discouraged about it, and I was starting to recommend to my clients that they stop using Google Plus. So about that time, maybe April of last year, Ben Fisher, who happens to be here, reached out to me, saw some of my research, and said that I can demonstrate to you that a successful Google Plus profile can dramatically influence local search pack results. Obviously there's, I'm a skeptic by nature, but in my mind I had a model where I could see where if you could achieve authority there, it might confer that authority onto the entity, but I was skeptical. I said, all right, let's create an experiment and let's see what happens. So we picked my favorite pet client, Barbara Oliver, who I frequently do. She allows me to do anything I want on her site. I don't typically charge her for it. I just do these experiments. And she hadn't been willing to pay for much local SEO. So you can see in the first this is a chart for last year. You can see in the first 6 months of the year, her search ranking, this is a search report from Whitespark, were pretty flat. And they'd been flat for a year before that. And even though her search ranking were flat, her analytics were slightly down with every Google update. So Ben and I and Barbara negotiated a contract, and Ben's team started work around the first week of June on her account with Google+. No other real significant activity going on. She was doing a little bit of Facebook work, had been during all of this, continuing to do reviews. And literally within 3 weeks, and at the end of a month, we saw significant gains from the Google Plus work. Now, as time went on, it sort of leveled initially, but even then we saw gains in the lower ranking phrases moving up from 10th to 9th to 8th to 7th. And then her designer, brilliant designer, decided that after 15 years, Barbara needed a new domain name and didn't bother to tell me, right? And so it took me 4 days to discover what had happened and to fix it. And just about that time, what you see here is the impact of Possum, right? You see Possum coming into play, a big drop. And at that point, my contract with Ben had ended. It was a 3-month relationship. We were going to test this. And I was again getting ready to do another talk, and I didn't really want to go into the talk on a down note. I'm such an optimistic guy. I didn't want to have a sad story to tell. So I renegotiated with Ben to continue, and you can see as soon as, within a couple days of they're doing this, we saw another uptick. Now, this differential is even more obvious when we look at Whitespark's local finder results. That's the July 10th date, or month after date. Big increase. You can see Possum here quite obviously, and the duration, the time when we weren't under contract with Ben, and then the increase after Ben's group started. So we had very good solid evidence that the work we were doing was working. And what is the secret? Well, the secret is shareable content that relates to the things that are important to Barbara. Right? Now, the new Google Plus, what that means, there's two things about Google Plus. It does two things, right? It's communities where people of a common interest in a topic work together, and it's collections where a person curates content in a given top-level sort of semantic placeholder, right? And it means content that reinforces that semantic category. And it means great pictures, right? That's what social is about, is relevant content and relevant categories. And then these collections that are at Google+, we created collections around the products and services and geography that were important to her: engagement rings and custom jewelry. Now, very coincidentally, Search Engine Roundtable reported right at the beginning, the date is like within a day of the beginning of our experiment, where Google says again that we don't use social media for ranking, right? So, but if you parse these references in this article carefully, what Google actually said wasn't that. What they said was, we don't use Facebook and Twitter for ranking. And the reason that we don't is that, one, we don't have a reliable feed. And two, we can't verify that the profile there is the entity which we're concerned with. And 3, we don't know who these people are. We don't have enough information about the people sharing this information to assign authority. But they have all those things in Google+. And they never mentioned Google+ as not being used for ranking. And clearly it is, right? Now, there's always a but, right? We're in local search, there's always a but. It isn't just shareable semantic content, it has to be shareable semantic content that gets shared. Now, originally when I was working in Google+, I thought it had to be shared by somebody with a great deal of authority. That isn't the case. It has to be shared by real people on a regular basis. And what we saw in Barbara's case was even, when even with the nominal number of followers that she accrued, these people were heavily engaged. So it isn't an issue. You can't go out and buy followers. It isn't the followers that matter. What matters is people who really are engaged with the content and really are sharing it, right? We saw pluses and reshares and comments, even with the nominal number of users that she had during this test. Now, finding folks at Google that will share and are interested in your topic is no simple task, right? I mean, it certainly doesn't have the, whatever 1.5 billion users that Facebook has. But what you find is that, there are enough users there in enough topic areas worldwide that are interested in most topical areas. And Ben's group was able to accrete followers at a fairly steady pace. We started this test June 10th, we ended it September 10th, and we went from 180 followers to over 800 followers. And we are now, Barbara agreed to continue this, we're now at 1,500 followers. When you have followers that do engage, good things happen, right? Doesn't every talk need like a puppy or a baby or something? I mean, Ramsey's did, so this is my Ramsey emulation moment. I don't have any babies to show. So anyways, and what we saw were very good things. I mean, we saw a high degree of engagement, reshares and comments and follow backs, right? And so and the other tactic he used, let me digress a little bit. What we saw, what seems to be the driver of authority at Google Plus is these, what Ben calls plus ones. It's all of the engagements. It's the +1 plus the comments plus the shares seems to aggregate authority that transfers to the profile, and that profile transfers the authority back to the entity in the local database. Now, one of the interests, and this is done using a standard social playbook where you do the research, you go into all of the collections, you search for people that are interested in this, you search for people that are writing about it, you then follow them and you hope that they follow back. And after you've looked through all of the interest groups and the communities and the collections, you then start looking for geographically related, you look for people in Buffalo, look for people in Western New York, upstate New York. But there's a problem at Google, and that is that there is a limit to the number of people that you can follow to get their attention of 5,000, which imposes serious constraints. So you can't go out and spam, 1 million people and get their attention that way. So one of the unique things that I saw Ben's group doing at Steady Demand was this idea that really Barbara isn't there to read content. She's there to improve her local rank, and all she really is concerned with is the people that are engaging with her. So what they would do is they'd take all the engagers and they'd move them into a separate circle, and when it comes time to hit the 5,000 limit, they would cut loose anybody who had followed her that wasn't engaging. Now, what did we see for results? What we saw was very interesting. So first we looked at web traffic year over year. We saw a dramatic increase in Google Plus traffic. We saw significantly lesser increases in traffic from Facebook and Yelp. But what that one got munched. Yelp and Facebook both the traffic was truly better, more local from Facebook and Yelp. But we saw really increased dwell times from the Google Plus people engaging on the site. So if those of you who think dwell time is important, and I happen to be one of those, it helps. And what I found as we went from 900 to 1,500, we're getting much more local engagement. If you were in a bigger market, you'd probably get more engagement. But the most important thing, we weren't that concerned with worldwide web visits. This is a bricks and mortar. Most of our clients live in the Buffalo area. And what we saw was ranking increases, which is hopefully going to be driving exposure into the local market. So what we did was we then drove into the Buffalo Metro, and what we saw in a 100-day post, 100-day pre-comparison, we saw a 9.3% increase. And remember, this is a 100-day comparison. My idiot designer left me with 4 days without data. So this is really roughly 14%. And we saw huge session duration increases. Now, this is a tough 100-day pre-post because the 100-day pre was Mother's Day, engagement season, graduation. These are summer months, right? And so then, just to be sure, we also did a year-over-year comparison where effectively with 5.6 plus 4, so roughly a 10% increase. So we were confident that we were seeing increases where we really cared about them. And most recent quarter over quarter, we saw a 25% increase in these metrics, right? So success. And then we did the same comparison with Google Insights, right? Looking at key performance indicators that Google was generating directly, looked at 90 days before, 90 days after, and what we were seeing is I thought I'd check this slide, I apologize, a 14% increase, very similar, interestingly, 14% increase in key performance indicators occurring at Google. And more importantly, what we saw was a 20% increase in driving directions, which for her, that's what she really cares about. She wants people driving to her place, and we saw a 20% increase there. And yet, she still has a lot of room for improvement here. Google Plus has this thing called featured collections, which is sort of the gold standard. They have curators that go around and look for collections that are getting a lot of engagement, that have great quality content. They then feature them, and then the algorithm shows them up to new users and features them. Now, I've been a user on Google Plus since day one. I really, I'm a bit of a contrarian. I don't like the idea of Facebook where I have to follow everybody who follows me. I just don't want to do it, right? So I've always liked Google+. I typically have about 21,000 followers, most of my collections, et cetera. Even with 21,000, I get engagement similar to what Barbara was seeing, right? But one of my collections was featured, and when it was featured, I jumped from 20,000 to close to 400,000, an 18x increase. And even when I am not doing something silly like I was testing Apple's new iMessage, I'm getting significantly more engagement. So there's a lot of room for growth in Barbara. So I think, in looking at these facts, and we place Google Plus on this graph, but I think that we need to add a z-axis to this graph, right? We need to be thinking about the same thing we thought about with Yelp, right? How prominent, are these pages? And it's the prominence of the pages and what impact does that have, right? So we need to add this z-axis, and then we plot our initial relevance, and we say, prominent page at Yelp, prominent page at Google+. What does that do? Well, what it does is it increases those profiles, transfer authority to the entity in the local knowledge graph, and that increases the likelihood that we're going to be showing on the terms that matter, right? Now, I think that as I think about this model, a beauty is that our websites work much the same way, right? You have a trusted, verified page, the authority page that's linked to from your GMB, that relates to this entity, so there's a high degree of trust that Google has. And this explains why links still work in this world, because this profile page, i.e. your home page, is an authority page. It confers authority back to the entity just like these other pages do. So I think as we move into this new world, we have to think about Barnacle marketing. I don't know how many of you have been in this industry since 2008, but Will Scott, who is now much thinner than he was at this time, came up with the idea of Barnacle marketing. Barnacle marketing is this thought that back then you would, 10 local pack, and then below it were all the IYPs and the Yelps and of the world. And those organic listings were going to get traffic, and you wanted to attach your business to those listings to benefit from it. So that was the idea. My idea is to revise this thought about Barnacle marketing, and what you want to do is attach yourself to those sites that Google perceives as authority sites in local, and not just attach yourself to them, but do well at them, achieve authority at those sites, so that authority at those sites can then confer authority to your local entity. That's what I call Barnacle marketing on steroids. Now, obviously, this is a model, and I don't know, all of the things that Google uses. I don't even know if things I've mentioned are true, but one can, take this idea and, we can extend it through a mind experiment into other ideas, right? I mean, we see that Google is emphasizing top 10 lists and critic lists. I believe those could be working in much the same way. Now that they have a reliable Twitter feed, it is conceivable to me that if you could develop a wildly shared Twitter account, it is conceivable to me that that authority could transfer to your local entity. Certainly YouTube or microsites could work this way. So there's a lot of room for experimentation. Oh, it's here and it's not there. I'm sorry. I'm getting a message on the screen that's different than the message I'm getting up here. Could I get somebody to remove that message from the screen, please? So anyways, there's a lot of room for experimentation in this, but I think my model, which is much simpler than deconstructing 250 ranking factors, is a much cleaner model to apply to a business, right? So some takeaways, some closing thoughts. Clearly we saw in the case of Cecil, traditional media is now starting to have a significant impact on local search results. Google is extracting all these facts, assigning these facts to an entity, don't neglect it. The role that reviews play is more complex and important across the web than we sort of thought of, right? We thought of it as a simple linear ranking signal, but reviews really are a contextual way within a given site to achieve authority on that site that can convert back. You want to think about categories more broadly. We talked about this a lot yesterday, but clearly third-party categories, Google is scraping them. They're using super pages and yp.com and Yelp to expand their categorical understanding of the world, so you want to be taking advantage of that. You critically want to learn which sites are driving authority at Google, and that in your vertical is where you want to be playing. And then finally, I think you want to think differently about this local algo. I don't think it serves us to deconstruct every little element and say that links are more important than reviews, are more important than content, are more important than this or that. It's like I don't participate in local search ranking factors because I think it's the wrong approach to thinking about the local algorithm. Now this chart, which is my closing chart, shows these results from Barbara Oliver to the current date, right? We continue to see gains. Now Google Plus isn't for everybody, I get that, but I think what you want to be thinking about is where can you find an authority site in addition to your website that your clients can play effectively, consistent with their business model, that can allow them to accrue the additional authority that these sites are conferring. And that's how I think you can move forward helping your clients. With that, thank you.